Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to advance in leadership, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, senior corporate leader, ex-Googler, and diversity expert. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success. Hi, I'm Monica, your host for today's episode. How did you discover your career path? Did you know what you wanted to do from childhood, or did you discover it later in life? Perhaps you're still seeking the perfect career for yourself. Meet our guest today, Erica Simpson, Senior Vice President in Business Development and Investor Relations at Shenkman Capital, who shares her career journey and how identifying her passions and skills early on helped her navigate a successful career in sales. From having the highest sales of Girl Scout cookies in the third grade to SVP at Shenkman Capital, Erica shares how identifying themes, seeking input from others, and taking opportunities to move the ball forward helped her advance and find a career she loves. Erica is a senior member of Shenkman's institutional business development team, focused on plan sponsors and consultants in the United States, and has 17 years of industry experience. Prior to joining Shenkman, she ran the business development efforts at IMC Asset Management. And prior to IMC, she was with Credit Suisse Asset Management, where she was responsible for alternative and traditional investment solutions for East Coast institutions. She began her career as an auditor for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Erica graduated with a BBA in accounting from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and is a certified public accountant in the state of New York. In this episode, Erica shares the key to building influential relationships, tips on executing effectively, and why it's important to seek out mentors. Visit iambeyondbarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Erica. Welcome, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you share your story with us, especially given that you are in a unique situation where you are in an industry that is extremely male-dominated, and you have been a superstar female leader who also is someone who lends the ladder down to help others climb the ladder as well. So without further ado, share a little bit about your story and what you've learned along your journey, and how did you end up in the industry that you're in?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this today. My name is Erica Simpson, and I'm a Senior Vice President here at Shenkman Capital. We manage about $30 billion across fixed income strategies here. And I'm in the business development role here. So I'm responsible for some of the largest relationships we have here at the firm. And I absolutely love what I do. So in terms of my story, it probably starts when I was a very young girl. I was a Girl Scout, and an eager one at that. And in the third grade, I had the highest sales of Girl Scout cookie boxes.
Wow.
The state of New Hampshire. When I was in third grade,
That's
I turned a big competition and ended up having the record that year. And so from a very early age, I realized that kind of sales was what I was driven to and what I ended up being good at. Mm-hmm. So I subsequently went into college, and there I was the head of the advertising department at the UMass Daily Collegian, which is the largest college daily in the country. Mm-hmm. We sold advertising. And again, I was in a different role there, but the theme was the same. And I really excelled there. So when I got out of school, I was actually an accounting major. Mm-hmm. Certainly not my background, and my personality was not kind of lined up for a long-term role in public accounting. But it was a great way to get my foot in the door. I knew I wanted to be in New York City, so I got a job at PricewaterhouseCoopers right out of school.
Right.
I got very quickly, and then knew that ultimately I wanted to be in a sales role within a financial organization, given my background in finance and accounting, but really my love sales. And so I navigated through what the different types of roles would be available for somebody with a background in that type of skill set. I talked to a lot of people, peers, friends, my father, the people he connected with, and determined that kind of institutional marketing would be a role that I thought I would be good at. And so I got a job as a very junior entry level position as a kind of sales associate at a small hedge fund of funds. Moved my career to the point where I'm now kind of leading the charge for some of the largest relationships here at Shenkman.
That's fantastic. And what I want to hone in on is that you at a very young age did pay attention to some of those things that came naturally to you. I think a lot of the times women and people in general make the mistake of something that comes really easy to you doesn't seem, you just kind of dismiss it or you take it for granted. But you paid attention as a Girl Scout that you were great in sales, and then in college, selling the advertising and those types of things. And the other key important thing you mentioned is that community, and you going out there and being proactive and tapping into the network and community to ask questions of like, where should you be focusing? Can you share a little bit about how do you, sales is all about relationships as well, but how would you break it down in terms of how do you develop a relationship, or how do you reach out to somebody cold and say, hey, I want to learn X from you?
Yeah. Well, and that's my career today, right? None of this I've been very fortunate to be in this role for many years. So I have a lot of relationships that have, transcended many years, but still an opportunity for a cold call. And, I'm not too above calling somebody completely out of the blue and asking them if they want to invest in credit. So I think that the common theme that really can apply to what I'm doing in my day-to-day job or developing relationships to help guide is really finding some type of shared connection. If you can take a person that you want to learn from, or you want to get a meeting with, if you can find some type of connection with them to make it less cold and to make it warmer and to connect, whether it's where they went to school or the fact that we're both moms or, there's a number of things. Tapping into that will help you stand out, I think, and make it more likely that relationship can develop. Because if you determine kind of shared commonalities, it makes people more open. It lets guards down, and it lets people really be their true authentic self, I think, and kind of share what it takes to be successful, let you in the office for a meeting, so on and so forth.
That's fantastic. And you've been successful in a really male-dominated industry. What would you say has been the key, or maybe your superpower, in being able to be that successful in an organization where there aren't a lot of people who look like you?
That's a great question. A lot of it is pushing forward. At the end of the day, I always viewed myself as somebody who could be successful, no matter what my background was, no matter where I went to school, no matter what my gender was. So I feel like for myself, as I continued into a sales role where I was surrounded by men, I held myself to the same exact standard. I went on maternity leave. I had my 2 children here at Shenkman Capital, and my job is to raise assets for the firm. And I said to myself, I have 9 months to do it, where my colleagues have 12. And I never used it and saw myself as somebody different that should have treated differently. And I think that has really helped propel me to the seat at the table that I am now. We all see each other as peers, and I never viewed myself as kind of looking for something special or different. Truthfully, I've probably used being a woman as a benefit in this business, right? Because at the end of the day, there aren't a lot of people, as you mentioned, there's not a lot of women in the business. There's even less amount of people that can have content, that can actually go and talk about high yield markets, which is our markets day in and day out. And so I use it as an advantage. And I've really said, hey, I'm a mom too. Let's chat about being parents, and let's chat about, investment markets. And so I think that is a huge piece of success for what I've been able to do here.
That's really insightful. And what you pointed out to me is, you took accountability, like you said, of like, I'm not going to request any kind of special treatment. And you really thought about, okay, I have 9 months to achieve this. I have 9 months to achieve this opposed to a year, like maybe my peer over here, my male peer. But that takes a lot of forethought, planning, and execution. So what tips can you share on effective execution, especially when you set a goal to achieve all of that in a smaller or finer, like tighter amount of time than somebody else?
Yeah, it's something that I feel like in my entire life, the way I've been able to kind of drive the ball forward at home, the office, is really just that exact word, and its execution. So the ability to take something that's in front of you, deal with it immediately, and move it to the appropriate place so you can focus on the next thing. And as I've grown up in this business, and as I've kind of taken on more roles and responsibilities, whether it be running our DEI committee here at the firm, as I mentioned, my children, the ability to kind of move forward, take things off my plate and put them on the plate of the responsible party and move it back to my plate, and always be thoughtful about kind of the execution piece of it will help the many balls that any, especially women, have in the air feel a little bit more manageable. And so I've always really, I have a task list that every single day when I get up, it runs out of my Outlook, but you could run it off a piece of paper or, whatever method is most convenient. But when I sit down at my desk for the day, I have a task list, and it's anything between 30 and 60 to-do items. And they could be, we have a client coming in tomorrow, and I need to make sure I'm thinking about the presentation materials. I have a doctor's appointment for my son. I need to make sure that I filled out the pre-registration form. But it helps collect my day-to-day so that I can kind of systematically work through those things. You're obviously always interrupted by phone calls and people walking by your office and things like that. But being able to be systematic, I think, is a huge way, to kind of organize your day-to-day. And then when I leave at the end of the day, which I was frantically trying to do before we got on the podcast, and I was 15 or 20 tasks, I make sure that entire task list is moved to either the next day or to the kind of the appropriate day. And so everything in life, especially in my business and what I do day to day, is in different levels of kind of where things are. And so I need to make sure that I'm applying enough thought to each task and each relationship and each action before moving on to the next.
I love what you said. There were some key things that resonated with me is that you talked about taking things that were on your plate and shifting them and putting them on other resources or other people's plates to kind of, pass the baton. And then 2, looking at your task list and moving things, to another day or to another time where you can focus on it. And so I know that I think sometimes when we have our task list, we forget to actually mark it on our calendars or move it along to where you're not going to forget. You kind of just let it sit there. But the other most important thing that I see a lot of women struggling with is delegation and leveraging other resources. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it seems like you were a master at that.
I don't know a master, but, being a woman, I feel you kind of always sit in this place of asking people to do things that are part of their job, but asking it in a way that is really at the end of the day, I feel, women should be in a position to know what their resources are, whatever they are at whatever level you are. And if somebody is tasked with helping you do something, it shouldn't be a, hey, can you do me a favor and get this done and let me know. I find a lot of women, myself included, fall into that, right? They fall into this kind of this soft asking. And I think that it's important that that you realize whatever seat you are, that there are people around to help you do what you do best, right? And ultimately, that's the way any organization should be structured. And so I think a lot of that has come over time. I've been here for a number of years, and so kind of the resources have been built around me. Mm-hmm. But understanding where you can ask and where you can just say, hey, this is the expectation. I want to make sure we're on the same page in a reasonable way, and not kind of soft stepping it and just being, and this is the expectation. This is what I think you're responsible for. This is what I'm responsible for. Let's make sure we're on the same page. And the other thing I'll mention is that, especially here at this firm, more so than other places I've worked, but, I really enjoy every single person that I work with. I mean, having a relationship with these people in and out of the office, celebrating milestones together, celebrating birthdays, being thoughtful co-workers to each other and colleagues. We all spend a lot of time at the office. And I think that making it feel like a family in your own way can really help get things done. Because at the end of the day, we all stand on each other's shoulders and we all want to be successful together. And so having the rapport with somebody where you can make the ask, I think is really, really important, and building those over time, whether it be, hey, you want to grab lunch, you want to get out for a drink, reaching across departments, things like that. I think it's really important to cultivate those relationships throughout your career, because you never know when you're going to need a lawyer to look at something really quickly, or a guy to notarize something in my office who's just sitting there, so cultivating those relationships helps, I think, with the resource perspective as well, because people want to help each other. People want to help people they like.
Yeah, no. And I think, also what I'm hearing from you too, is that idea of reciprocity, right? Of just making sure that you are being helpful but you're asking and you're kind of delegating, like you said, as we should, but not thinking of it as a favor or kind of like I'm burdening this person of like, no, these are, these are the boundaries and this is the set thing. Let's all work together to kind of get it done. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And in a respectful and collegial way. Right. And there's a line that you find that I've found really hard to toe over my career here, or over my entire career, is that, there is a line of making sure that you do everything respectfully. But my work will only get done if everybody else is doing their work and they're rowing in the same direction to one.
Yeah, in it together. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit because I know that being in an industry like the financial industry that you're in can be very competitive, can be very type A, can be like you have to be on your toes all the time and you have to bring your A game all the time. Tell me, did you ever have any fears or limiting beliefs when you first, started in the space, and do you still deal with them? And if so, how do you get past them?
Oh, it's a great question. I've thought about this a lot because I was an accounting major, and I've had the opportunity over my career to sell a number of different types of strategies. So here at Shenkman, we sell high yield and below investment grade credit. But I've sold private equity and commodities and hedge funds and a number of different types of strategies. And one of the largest fears, candidly, that I've always had is that my knowledge on the subject matter wasn't enough. And, I would come into these situations. I mean, I started here at Shenkman over 7 years ago, and I didn't know the high yield markets well at all. I knew finance at a high level. I had sold a lot of things, but some of my previous roles were much broader in terms of investment strategies. So I needed to know a little bit about a lot. Here we're supposed to be focused on one asset class. And so I needed the ability to go deep and really be able to know the subject matter. And I remember early days, calling my mother and being like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hack this, and I was given a big job and I want to make sure that I represent the firm well. So how do you get over it? Some element of fake it till you make it has really always kind of has always been in my mind, right? At the end of the day, I'm going and talking about a firm that I know better than anybody at the table.
Right.
And I put that back in my mind to say, nobody's going to tell me, oh, the majority of people won't tell me, oh no, I know more about Shenkman Capital than you do. This is the firm I'm representing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the other thing is the grace to not have to know everything, because you can really start to get into a bad, scenario if you start trying to answer things that you don't know the answer to.
Right.
And at the end of the day, being able to say, I don't know, and I'll get back to you is a completely fine answer. And, a lot of people don't feel like that's the right way to message. And I think that, that's a shame, because at the end of the day, you'll get yourself into much more trouble, and it won't be an honest representation if you start saying things that aren't accurate. And so
right.
I think that's, being able to say that. And the last thing I'll mention is, the way the world sees you, oftentimes I think is not the way that you see yourself. And so,
that's important.
It's incredible to me, like, even to be invited to be on this podcast. I feel like I've done a great job in my career. I love what I do, but to be, asked to represent senior women, and you sit back and you say, I guess I am that. But to me, I was still, I'm still a young, girl out of college just trying to make it. And so, the way the world sees you, is oftentimes you are yourself's harshest critic. And I always try to remind myself of that. Because, it's easy to get wrapped up in that. And that's when the fears start to creep in.
That's fantastic. And I love, what you're saying about how you took this job and you didn't necessarily, know everything. Like you said, you didn't know deep. You knew a lot, you knew a lot, but very little of a lot, kind of like, and you needed to go deep in this area. And I'm so proud that we have an example here for our listeners and the women and others who listen of how you threw your name in the hat, you took the job, and then you really embraced the idea of just-in-time learning and learned when you needed to do it. Because so many times, and statistics show this over and over, is that women self-select and opt out when they can't check the box on everything on a job description. And so this is a perfect example. Like you said, you came in, you took this job, and you were, there was a little bit of that self-doubt, like, oh my gosh, but your superpower was learning and the competency to be able to learn. And look at you now.
What if you could pinpoint the invisible ceilings limiting your success? Imagine having clarity on your strengths and barriers so you can take action and gain unstoppable momentum to advance as a future-ready leader. Well, that's exactly what the Beyond Barriers quiz will help you discover. You'll get your personalized score based on the 25 essential elements proven to accelerate success in the digital age, so you can understand what's holding you back and where to focus your efforts. The Beyond Barriers quiz is completely free and takes just a few minutes. Go to iambeyondbarriers.com/quiz and take the quiz today.
So what other words of advice, are there other instances that you can think of where, you just dove right in, even though you may not have really needed everything that you supposedly needed to say yes?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that the way to live your life is to constantly be pushing that envelope and to constantly be introspective about where you can add value. And so for me, I feel like, I've always throughout my entire career, I've said, I can do anything I put my mind to, and I try to tell myself that, and hopefully it'll play out. But when I joined the firm, anecdotally, I was against a male that was much older than me. And the person that hired me here ended up being one of my mentors in life. And I aligned myself with him. I got to know him, and he ended up being, he was my boss for many years, but ended up being a huge mentor in the business for me. So I found that, you dive in, but then you have to ask and navigate to figure out how you can be the most successful, and you can't do it alone. Right. And so I found that I jumped in, I had to learn, I had to ask the right questions. I had to surround myself by all the intelligence here at Shenkman Capital. And I had to lean on people to get to ultimately be successful. And so I think that when I think about kind of diving head in, you jump in and you say, I'm going to move forward towards this goal, but you really have to ask for the help, and you have to identify people that are willing to help you. Right. And if you find those people in your life, and I can count, I have 2 mentors in this business that identified me and said, you're going to be successful here, and helped guide the way. And if I hadn't met them, I would never be in the seat that I was in. And so I feel really fortunate that I had that, but I had to seek it out in order to be successful, I think.
I love the way that you broke that out in terms of asking for help and the fact that you couldn't do it alone, because I think one of the biggest archetypes of imposter syndrome that rears its ugly head and causes very unresourceful habits for people is those that think that they have to figure it out themselves and don't ask the right questions. And I think that was extremely important. But the other piece that you mentioned was having really strong mentors and sponsors that helped you along the way. And I don't want to make a gross assumption, but I'm assuming that these mentors or sponsors didn't look like you. Am I right?
No.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I have a lot of young women that we, even through Beyond Barriers, that we coach and help, accelerate in their careers. But the biggest hang up they get is they're always looking for female mentors, or, they're like, oh, I don't know who to ask to mentor me, when there are so many people in front of you or around you that can mentor you. So talk a little bit about that.
So, here at our firm, for example, there's a very senior woman who was our legal counsel or general counsel for many years. Our head of our ESG initiatives is another very senior woman who's been at Shenkman for 20 plus years. But there was nobody that had the job that either I wanted or that I was doing. And I bet it's more important, and maybe not more, but it's of the same importance to have a mentor that has the job that you ultimately want. Like the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which I'm still trying to figure out. It was basically sitting right here. It was managing senior relationships. It was selling. It was traveling. And so I had to go into the marketplace and find that job, and then ultimately find somebody who had that job and say, okay, how'd you get there? And it didn't matter that my first was a managing director at Credit Suisse, who is still a dear friend. And he had the job that I wanted. And I was in a different type of role at Credit Suisse. And I knocked on his door. I literally went over to his office and I said, I want to work for you. What does it take? And he said, there's no job available here for you. You're an associate. We only have managing directors in my group. And then I said, well, if one opens up, I think this is what I was born to do. And he called me 3 months later and he said, I created a job for you. And he moved me over to the distribution role at Credit Suisse. And that's kind of what catapulted my career. But I literally went over to his office. He was an athlete. Prior to kids, I was a distance athlete. I ran a couple marathons and did an Ironman. So we bonded over that. And that was our commonality. That was our common ground. And to this day, I have a big win at my firm and I'll call him. He's my biggest cheerleader. And so, so I feel like, and I've had that in a couple places. And when I came to Shenkman, my boss, who's no longer here, he was the one that hired me and he had the job I wanted, right? Ultimately, not exactly, but he was the older version of what I saw myself, and myself in 10 years, what did I want to be? And so it didn't matter what he or she looked like, or did. But they wanted me to be successful and helped me, grow. And without these two, they happen to be men, but without these two people, I would never be where I am today. So, that is probably the biggest importance of my career, and the way that it zigged or zagged was asking to be aligned with the people that have those jobs that you're like, I would love to do that.
Your story just brilliantly described what I am always trying to share with young women that I coach and mentor, is that you have to identify what success looks like in the organization. And then, once you identify and define what that success looks like, then you emulate the characteristics and all of that. And you did exactly that. Like you said, I found somebody who had the job that I wanted, and I went out to them and I said, how do I get here? And that, in a nutshell, I mean, I will be sharing this podcast over and over so people can actually realize it, because, when you tell them you've got to define success and know what it looks like, it's really hard. It's not very tangible for someone to kind of understand what you're trying to say. And your story was perfect, where you went and you sought out this person, you didn't know who they were. And just because you shared that with that person, you said, hey, you have something valuable I want to learn. That sparked a relationship, and they bought into you and created an opportunity for you. And so you attracted that opportunity. And I think that is just an amazing story that I will be sharing over and over again. So thank you for that.
I hope he sees it too, because it's been, and both of my mentors have always said, like, it's you, Erica. I have little to do with this. And I could not disagree more. So it's such an interesting dynamic, because they saw something in me and I see such value in them. And it's just, it's, life is too short to go through, to be in a role that you don't love and not be surrounded by people that you love doing it. I really believe that. And so I've been really, really blessed with that.
That's fantastic. Well, as we close out the podcast, I know that you have lots of pearls of wisdoms that you would want to impart on our listeners, but what is something that you want to share with them as you close out, in terms of just what it takes to be, successful in their own right?
I'm a firm, but I think everybody has a different role, a different path to success. And so ultimately what works for me might not work for somebody else. But for me, I think it's a couple of things, but I do think the structure that I put around my day-to-day, in all facets of my life, is really important to making things work in my life. Right. So I have 2 young children, and I am kind of the CEO of my house. And then I'm working a big job here. So I feel like for me, establishing structure, maintaining a calendar, all of those things, they're little things, but they really kind of set the stage and the expectation for kind of what I need to check off the box, and I was talking to my husband last night about this very discussion, and we were talking about, you get out of bed in the morning and you make the bed, right? That's the first thing you do.
Right.
And, it checks the first thing off your list of what you need to accomplish in any given day. And so I found that personally for me, kind of that driving things forward, but kind of checking things off the list along the way, just moving it on to the next thing, has really, helped me, kind of get through and get to this point in my career. And the other thing that I constantly think about is I love my job. I absolutely love it. I don't love it 100% of the time, but every single day I come in and I'm like, I'm really happy I'm here. And I'm thrilled with what I do. And so I feel like so many times people are in roles that they don't love. And
right.
I've said this a couple of times, but life is too short. And so if you find something that you really love, you can be successful at it, whether it be in finance or whether it be in teaching or whether it be, in any type of role. It doesn't feel like work if you love what you do. And,
right.
and you have to constantly seek that out. You have to constantly say, am I happy most of the time? Because there's just so many different roles and things that you can do with the things that you're good at. And so, I feel really, really lucky that I am in a job that I love every single day. But I think I've sought that out. I've never settled. I've said I'm not gonna 50% of the time hate what I do. No, it's not. Life is too short, and I think that constantly driving for kind of that is really important for me.
That is so insightful. And what you said around the structure and the boundaries that you set so that you can make sure you are successful in work and in life is probably key to that work-life integration that you're talking about. But then the fact that you said you love what you do, that's the other important factor where, you love what you do. So you're able to kind of manage that all together and identifying, where to the sense where, it doesn't necessarily feel like you're going to burn out, especially with the structure and the boundaries. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing now these days is that individuals who start feeling the burnout is because they're not practicing that structure that you're talking about. So I know I promised it was going to be the last question, but you touched on it a little bit. These daily habits and rituals that you do. How do you actually, in your mind, you talked a little bit about like your calendaring, your list and things like that, but how do you communicate those expectations to other key stakeholders, be it work or at home?
So I think for me, maintain the ability to do all of these things. Mm-hmm. The concept of it taking a village is not an exaggeration, right? I have a lot of people in my life, both at work and at home, that help our day-to-day. Mm-hmm. What comes with that is a lot of different, to your point, stakeholders that need to be communicated. And so, right. I found that over communication across multiple mediums so that there's no confusion is the best way. Childcare, for example, we have our nanny. My mom and dad live close by. They're very involved. My husband. So there's a lot of people that are involved. And so, a shared calendar across all of us. So everybody's on the same page. They seem like simplistic things, but it's an over communication. Like, does my mom necessarily need to know that my nanny's taking my son to the doctor? No, but having it all in one place so that people can kind of all level set, I think is critically important. And right. So I think, there's a lot of emails, there's a lot of multiple text chains. I think that communication of kind of just laying what is going on out helps people feel empowered to operate as part of this microcosm that is,
right.
is family and who I am. Right. And so I think that it's the communication piece of it that is really critical because things can get lost if you talk on the phone even, and we talk to one person and then somebody else is in. So, calendars and electronic ways to manage right. all of this is critically important.
No, I think that's so important. The communication piece, and that's just it. Communication comes down to, like you said, over communicating what needs to get done, but then also communicating those boundaries and the needs or the help that you need of being able to kind of put it out there so that, like you said, it takes a village, but they come together and it all gets done. Well,
most
yeah, on most days, correct. Well, Erica, this has been such an insightful and inspiring conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we reach out to you to just kind of get your pearls of wisdom, but I'm also sure that there will be lots of listeners who want to know how to maybe connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that? LinkedIn, Facebook, what is that?
Yeah, so I have it all. I found that it's hard to not have it all between all the different, moms groups and work groups that I'm a part of. But LinkedIn is probably the best.
Sure.
Pretty active there through my work connections. So I would say that's definitely ideal.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. We know that you are super busy, and we appreciate you having being on the Beyond Barriers podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Barriers podcast. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and tell a friend about it. And subscribe to get new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes, links, and the best way to connect with our guests. See you next episode.